Okay, last one. There's no Lizzie Borden without The Woman in Maplecroft, right? So I was aware in writing a novel about her as a teenager that I wasn't giving the reader any, Lizzie up on the hill stories. So the last story does start in 1927, right before her death, and she's thinking back over the years. The last story is a flashback. And I guess I did a Maplecroft thing at the end of the book in case there isn't a second book. It's sort of like we round something out there. But there's plenty of stories to come. Here's Lizzie in 1927 from the story The Melancholy Scion. 1927, Fall River, the Hill. For Lizzie Borden, Andre DeCamp will always be the poet. In all of her 66 years on earth, she had never been known to pay such reverence, silent or otherwise, to any member of the male sex, whether to applaud virtue or to praise physical elegance. But Andre DeCamp, scion of a wealthy French family that had relocated to Fall River in the summer of 1877, a tall, brooding, and handsome bachelor of 19 years, the product of private civilized education, brilliant and concisely intelligent, fastidious in his manly dress, precise in his manners, held a special place in Lizzie's estimation of the masculine half of humanity. She first glimpsed him at a midsummer charity event in the church hall of the First Congregational. Standing with his illustrious family, the father wearing proudly a decorated uniform, the mother and sister posed upright with pious concentration, Andre bowed his head towards Lizzie, just once, as if in humble supplication. The gesture sent a chill through Lizzie's being. She quickly became impressed with how the DeCamp men were so different from the money-driven barons who banked her city, the industrialists who would never design a cathedral or build an opera house lest they would consider it a foolish dollar spent. Andre DeCamp may have been spawned from that same society class, yet he brought with it all the cultured elegance of Paris and the dark mysteries of the southern Languedoc, far-off locales that Lizzie had admired through sepia photographs of mountainous regions with lush outcroppings and deep-veined soil, a land she thought only existed in her dreams. Andre was a graceful aristocratic youth who, like herself, was more comfortable with the personal passions and the aesthetics of everyday life than with the complexities of commerce. She saw in him not the proud marshals and presidents of France's dusty past, nor the great sun kings in their splendid palace, but in him she saw the simple shepherds from the paintings of Poussin, the noble musketeers of Dumas, and the provincial people of the tales of Flaubert. He embodied in his presence all the excitement, adventure, and beauty that she had admired in the great French paintings and novels that made their way to various Fall River parlors for her viewing admiration. In her opinion, he far outpaced in every manner the collective men of his generation. But for the rest of her days, she would never speak his name aloud. Even as an aging woman on the hill, secluded in her summer bedroom in the rambling Maplecroft, her manse and hermitage, alone as she looked back upon a dark and hidden life, she would only speak of Andre as the poet, and then briefly, and then only to a chauffeur or a domestic who was not of her generation, who would never have heard of the DeCamp family, or would never repeat her words to anyone in town who may have known them, and then only when she was caught off guard with some seizure of nostalgia for a Fall River that had once been and now was no more. But when the glimmer came into her eyes and she spoke of the poet, when she made oblique references to faces and places now lost to time and memory, when she hinted that once she had loved and felt within her breast a singular passion, the likes of which had never been repeated, it was the summer of 1877 and the Melancholy Scion where her thoughts took her. Back to a time before she was the secluded spinster on the hill, before she sat alone in church because no fellow citizen would occupy the pews adjoining hers, before she was accused of that terrible crime whose shadow she would never escape, back when she was young and fresh and alive, to the time when she walked the streets of Fall River, and Andre DeCamp, who was also young and fresh and alive, and who, despite her unwillingness to let her heart be so directly touched, had truly loved her, back when she was Lizzie Borden, girl detective.
You're such a good writer.
Let them decide.
No, you are.
Can you take questions, Richard?
Sure, yeah.
Where did you get the idea to do Lizzie Borden as a young girl detective?
One day on Amazon, I bought my Nancy Drew starter kit. Because I grew up with an older sister, and she loved, she loved the Nancy Drew books. When I was reading them, from an adult perspective, I found them charming, but I also found them amusing. And I said, wow, here's this young girl, a ebullient girl living in this like iconic town with a father who has like a big standing in society that everyone's always trying to kill. And my mind just took that leap.
And a good leap it was.
Well, I tried a few other things with the girl detective concept with other characters in other places, and it really wasn't working. And when I combined it with Lizzie Borden in Fall River, it suddenly started flowing.
Very good.
You could do an audio version.
We're working on it,
Yeah, you should do one.
You know Jill Dalton?
As Stephanie says, you're well written, and it's the kind of story that I have two 12-year-old twin daughters.
Yeah.
They're gonna love it. Yeah, you could do an audio.
Well, you know Jill Dalton, from Lizzie Borden Live, we're working on it. We're going to start with one story.
Well, you ought to be one of the characters too.
Yeah.
Your reading's very good.
Yeah.
I'll do some of it.
Yeah.
Was there any Sherlock Holmesian influence in
Oh,
this?
Yeah. It's not written in the style of Sherlock Holmes, but I definitely, I read all, I think it was like 56 Sherlock Holmes short stories. I read all of them before I started. So, as a matter of fact, in a future story, she meets Arthur Conan Doyle. He's a young medical student. He was Irish, grew up in Scotland, and when he went to Edinburgh for medical school, because Dr. Watson is based on himself.
Right.
It's like what he would have been if he had become a doctor. So I have him come to America, and he's working as an apprentice to Dr. Bowen. And one day there's a medical emergency at the Borden house.
Have you thought of getting Mark Twain involved?
Yeah, because Mark Twain had a presence over in Fairhaven, which is nearby. He was friends with the billionaire Rogers, who was over in Fairhaven. And Twain, I have to look up the exact years, but I have to match it up. So there's some characters I'd love to have, but they would have been too young or too old when Lizzie was this age. But I'm gonna have Gilbert and Sullivan, come to the Academy building. And, the Steinway brothers, from the Steinway piano business. And Sherlock Holmes is not going to exist in her universe, but she'll meet Conan Doyle, who's like, he's thinking of being a doctor, but after he meets her, he starts thinking.
When can we expect the next volume?
Maybe by the end of the year.
Good.
Yeah, it has to go through a laborious editing process. So, well, I hope you enjoy it.
Yes.
It's like some feedback if you.
And the more you know about Lizzie, the funnier some of the passages are.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they really are funny.
Yeah, I threw out some in jokes for you
Yes.
guys.